What's going on, Ambitious Vets? Welcome to episode number 35 of The Ambitious Vet with Marine Corps veteran and Knucklehead Promotions LLC founder, Stephen Cullen. Welcome to The Ambitious Vet. My name is Chris Hoffman, Marine combat veteran turned passion-driven entrepreneur. Now guys, we're here to dive into the trenches with today's top-performing military veterans that were once warrior-made, but are now passion-driven. Now guys, as they share their stories, their failures, and their journeys of what it took to make it happen out of the uniform, guys, we just hope that this unlocks your secret formula to living a more impactful, meaningful, and purpose-driven life out of the uniform. All right, ambitious vets, have you ever thought about what does ambitious actually mean? Well, it's unique for everyone. In this episode that we're about to embark on, Inside the Trenches with Stephen Cullen, is that, for me, it really is having to prove myself coming from a kid that, getting out of high school, I weighed 150 pounds dripping wet, never had any resources. A lot of people would have counted me out, but this inner drive of just trying to prove myself is where my ambition is breeded from. So I don't know what it means to you guys, but all I know is that when you were serving in the uniform, right, you understood that freedom was not free. Right? Fighting for freedom for the country was not free. There's a lot of sacrifices, a lot of trials and tribulations. Shit, I was there at 4 a.m. hiking and driving my body through hellacious stuff, not stretching and barely stretching and all that kind of stuff, and definitely feeling it right now. The picture I'm trying to point out for you, ambitious vets, is that when you get out of the uniform, that vision isn't free. You getting free out of the uniform or success out of the uniform isn't free either, right? And this is what this podcast, this movement is all about, right? You've got to get out there. You've got to sacrifice. You got to go through new trials and tribulations as a level 1 with good soft skills and hard skills. But also, you got to surround yourself with brothers and sisters like-minded with the same ideology as you of getting out of the uniform and killing it. Guys, I want you to go right now to the Ambitious Vet Tribe on Facebook, where we have over 500 ambitious vets just like you that are about a couple years out. They got stability underneath them, but they're desiring more. They want more. They want more satisfaction, fulfillment. They got a big mission, but they don't know the first steps. And we're coming together to connect, share resources, strategize, and also offer a shit ton of offers on helping ambitious vets really get out there and create some tangible success that has you feel like Superman. So guys, that's the Ambitious Vet Tribe on Facebook. We look forward to seeing you there. All right, ambitious vets, let's dive into the trenches with today's guest. Today's guest is Stephen Cullen. He's a Marine Corps Staff Sergeant veteran. He's founder of Knucklehead Promotion LLC and the Elite Mindset Facebook group, where their sole mission is to help alpha males that are out there actually understand the secrets of actually what the most successful alpha businessmen, professionals, and top performers actually how they operate, which is not making their life mistakes mean anything more than a knucklehead moment. And really not taking yourself too seriously. Getting out there, not being beta, but also getting some small wins to breed some confidence, guys. It's a great mission that Stephen Cullen is out there creating. He's done the whole climb up the corporate ladder thing, was a former director of operations for a company, and played high-level college football for Nebraska University. So this guy knows what it takes to become optimal in multiple industries, and now he is well on his way to being one of the top podcasters in the Dallas region. So if you guys are in the Dallas region, guys, I definitely encourage you to reach out to Stephen Cologne from Knucklehead Podcast. He is killing it. His formatting is on point. But more importantly, I got to meet him about a month ago, me and Maggie, my better half. And the guy is his brand. When you're sitting there talking to him, he is a knucklehead. He's talking about problems, mistakes, failures, and stuff like that. And just like it's laughable, right? He lives his brand. There's not a lot of people that live with integrity with what they say they are and who they are. And I can say Steven is one of those guys. So guys, without further ado, I love this episode. I did not want it to end. We get raw, we get authentic. We're just two alpha Marines that open our hearts wide open and share our deepest secrets, failures, knucklehead moments, you name it. We get raw inside of this one. But more importantly, you're going to get practical advice on how to get out there and start living a life of wins and consistency and just living your life to the peak potential that you are listening for in this. Without further ado, let's go ahead and dive in the trenches with Stephen Cullen.
It's great to be here, Chris. I am now unmuted, so I can chat with you. What's happening?
What's up, brother?
Empowerment Transition Group and my buddy Chris Hoffman. I appreciate those kind words. Thank you very much, man. It's an honor to be here.
Absolutely, brother. It's good to have you on here, man. I mean, we've been working together for a long time, sharing guests on the back end with podcasts and all that good stuff. Go ahead and fill the gaps of that introduction, man, and tell us a little bit about who you are outside of what I just said.
Well, you touched on a few things that obviously you can get the memory going. First of all, the whole reason behind starting Knucklehead Podcast, and I'll get into the background of what you just touched on, was you don't have to look very far to find somebody who knows exactly what it is to do in order to get that next extra little bit out of whatever it is that you're doing, whether or not they have experience doing what it is that you're doing. You don't have to look too hard to find an expert. And I got really tired really quickly in the business world of people acting as if they had it more figured out than I did, even though I know they did. I have an ego, right? And when people who've been there, done that, try to put me in my place or try to outperform me or posture and all of those things, they turn to a consultant, and a consultant gives them a golden grenade, so to speak, and then they use that in a meeting, and then that's the agenda that moves forward. I got really tired of having to deal with that posturing, to be honest with you. So I found that the most effective way for me to communicate is, hey, listen, irregardless of what it is or where you're at in your journey, you don't have to have it all figured out. You just got to be willing to go out there and screw up. And if you're willing to put yourself out there, what we call don't be beta, you'll find that you're going to fail. And then when you fail, if you're willing to go out there and analyze what went wrong, then you can be more prepared the next time you go out there. Now, I'm not saying I'm moving to Chechnya tomorrow to start like a munitions company. What I'm saying here is I'm saying that if you want to start a business, if you want to go out there and aggressively make more money than what you've ever had before, then you have to go out there and do things differently than what you previously had. And sometimes that's more possible in the sales game than it is maybe if you're in operations or in, customer service or whatever the case may be. But if you want to go out there and you want to take control of some of the circumstances that you have, it won't happen, and it won't happen consistently until you've earned your confidence, earned your self-respect. And that's why we, have those two slogans. You got to be willing to put yourself out there. Don't be beta. And you got to be willing to go out there and get some wins. And so going back to the story that you introduced me, man, my background is I'm the third boy. I come from a divorced, family. My dad's been married quite a few times. He's a good dude, but much like folks in my generation, we grew up with separate families, right? You grew up with step brothers or step whatever. So I clung really, really closely to my older brothers. They set an example for me. I wanted to be them when I got older. They actually played college football. I wanted to go do that. I was fortunate enough to earn a spot on the University of Nebraska football team. However, it took me 2 years of being on my own and living with a buddy of mine in order to actually do that. So, like I said, my dad moved to the other side of the country. He moved to DC. I stayed in Nebraska, and essentially my entire family was down in Texas. That's a completely different story for another time on why I was in Nebraska to begin with. But
Yeah.
so anyway,
Nice, brother.
I feel like I'm
Love it.
rambling. So yep, for
Love
sure.
it. Love it, man. So I mean, regardless of circumstances, really ambitious vets, what I'm getting from that is like, you can't be beta, right? We weren't designed to be beta. We were designed to be alphas, or we wouldn't been able to persevere through, in our case, the Marine Corps, whatever respective branches you were in. Guys, get out there and you define your circumstances, right? Get out there and do what it takes to get out there and fail your way. Fail often and fail fast is what I always say. So that's awesome. So brother, speaking of which, tell us a little bit about your transition story out of the Marine Corps and how you started creating traction.
Wow. Well, first of all, I appreciate the premise of the question. It insinuates that there was traction to begin with.
Yeah, right.
I didn't have it.
Yeah.
I didn't have it. I got out of the Marine Corps. So there's two pathways, and those of you who are listening who spent some time in, there's two pathways whenever you join the military. Marine Corps probably a little bit more prominent than any other branch of service when it comes to how of a stark contrast there is between these two pathways. But one of those pathways develops what I call a kind of a victim mindset, and the other one is the opposite of victim. I don't want to say winner mindset, because it's not always that way. It's different than victim. I'd almost say responsibility mindset. You know, a lot of times you have guys who just kind of get promoted up and through the ranks because they, were in the right place, right time, or they just, they got enough time in service, time in grade, and so they get promoted, or they take a test and they do well, whatever the case may be. And then there's guys who get meritoriously promoted. They're Marine of the Quarter. They're the guys that guys and gals, that are just top performers.
They're shit hot.
So and they really are. And I was fortunate enough to get around a buddy of mine named Heltzley. And his story is very unfortunate, but he was one of the first Marines that I met when I first got to Okinawa. I had just gotten married, right? My wife lived in Dallas. I lived in Okinawa. So that separation was awful. Our entire first year of marriage, I lived on Okinawa, and I lived in Okinawa. She lived in Dallas. But one of the first people I ran into was my buddy Heltzley. And anybody who's listening who knows Heltzley knows that he was like a 5.0, 4.9 pros and cons. He was a shit hot Marine. He was a green belt tab instructor. By the time he was a corporal, he was doing some good things in the military.
Yeah.
But he would not be told what to do. Like he could not curtail him. So he screwed up a bunch and he ended up getting busted down to private and kicked out for some things that he did. However, if you look at the thought process of putting himself out there, it's what made him, it's what set the example for those Marines who needed to, at least, because you can't steer a parked car. So you have to be able to have some ambition about what it is that you're doing, but you can't be reckless. And what happened is in time, those reckless decisions kind of caught up with him. So what I found, I was always able to outpace my reckless decisions until I got out of the military. Those reckless decisions, you're not necessarily held accountable for those whenever your stability, your 3 squares a day, your housing is paid for, you get paid BAH. But until you're held accountable to your performance, until you're held accountable for your, and don't take this the wrong way. There's a tremendous amount of guys who are still in the military who are held accountable for their performance. But what I'm talking about is if you're not successfully writing net new business, going out there and earning your stripes as a sales producer, going out there and leading a team, providing systems and processes and administration in order to help folks actually progress in their careers. If you're not doing those things, then you don't eat. That's what I mean by held accountable for your performance. And that framework and administration that the military provides gives you the ability to kind of outpace your bad decisions. But when you get out, that's gone. And so your bad decisions will catch up with you. So to answer your question, that's a long-winded way of saying that I did not have a whole lot of traction getting out. And I had a wife that was pregnant and we needed to get moving. And I just wasn't. I got paralyzed. I got paralyzed by getting out. I got paralyzed by trying to think like I had to do things perfectly. And the paralysis by analysis stuck in, and it was hard. It was a really difficult thing for me to do. So the transition for me sucked.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's pretty much the same across the board. Anybody we interview in here wasn't an easy transition, right? That's why it's called transition. But I really love what you said, brother. I love what you said about outpacing your chaotic or your missed mistakes or stuff like that. And I even see, man, with Knucklehead podcast or any content that you're putting out there on social media, however you're doing it with video, is always about mistakes and what you can actually learn from them. And mistakes don't actually really matter in the broader scheme of things. But I really like this pace language. And before we dive into that just a little bit more, I want to give a shout out to Robert Ellum. Thanks for joining. I went to Marine Corps boot camp with this guy. He's actually watching us live right now. We got Lorraine Cuff. She just actually joined the tribe. Brilliant girl. She's actually just created this program called Book Yourself Solid. Talked to her last week. She's doing some really cool things as far as veteran business owners. So guys are trying to book yourself solid in business, connect with Lorraine Cuff. She's brilliant. I think she's over in New York area. So, brother, back to outpacing your mistakes and stuff like that, brother. I mean, how did you start pacing? And, I get that the transition sucked, but it sucked for a lot of us when we got out, right? We all hit that breaking point and stuff like that. But how did you start pacing your way up or creating purpose and individuality? Because obviously now you got a family, you're thriving in Dallas now. How did you start finding your individuality and purpose out of uniform?
That's a really good question, man. It's a really good question. So it wasn't until I met some guys who had their heads screwed on straight. And I say guys, you had mentioned, what'd you say her name was? Lorraine. Is that right?
Lorraine. Yep.
Lorraine. Okay. So Lorraine, don't completely hang up on Chris now, just because I said guys. I'm talking about guys and gals. So that's a figure of speech, right? So the reason why I say like-minded folks, I was able to get around some like-minded folks, and I got attracted to being a part of something that was bigger than me. So I met with some folks, and I got linked up. I think you've talked about this a little bit before about multi-level marketing. Mm-hmm. I got linked up with some folks who were doing some multi-level marketing, and we had some success, so to speak, meaning we hit some brackets and made some income, and I thought that it was more kind of a larger purpose. And they're great people. They were able to actually help me get attracted to some self-help material and develop a habit of reading and going out there and searching for information. So there's a development component to that business that I really enjoyed. However, it can become self-destructive over time if you don't allow yourself to decouple your role versus your identity. And that was a very difficult thing for me to really do, because I mean, when you're a Marine, you're in there, you're honor, courage, commitment, you're beating your rack, you're going out there and doing PT, because when you do PT, then it helps your PFT score. If it helps your PFT score, then you potentially can make more income. So there's a lot of, things you can't decouple, what you're doing on Liberty versus what you're hold accountable for at formation at 1100 before you go each afternoon chow. So it may seem as if I'm bouncing around a little bit, but it all comes back to the point of this. Unless you surround yourself with some folks who are like-minded, you're always going to be this free radical in life. And that's what I was when I got out of the military, because I wasn't surrounded with guys and gals or folks that were like-minded. But I also needed to be able to screw up enough and go through some pain and struggle, essentially not being able to feed my family, pay rent, or any of those civilian type responsibilities. You need to be able to, I mean, quite frankly, not having any money and owing thousands and thousands of dollars of bills within the next 24 to 48 hours. Just having that, kind of pucker effect, so to speak, take place, and know that everything's going to work out the way it's supposed to. I mean, meaning you have to go out there and perform anyway. You can't be mentally unstable through that process without allowing yourself to be mentally unstable a few times and falling flat on your face and screwing up, and then realizing you can hold it together and you can make some things happen. So you have to be able to, like I heard it said a long time ago, that if you're going to be a successful individual, first of all, you have to recognize what success is in somebody else first. So that means you need to start having and developing success habits within what your own daily within your own daily operations or your daily disciplines. So I had to stop being lazy mentally. I had to stop being mentally complacent. I had to start making my bed first thing in the morning. I had to start helping my wife with simply, I mean, this is stupid. This is why I tell you, like, get some wins. Take the trash out, do the dishes, do those simple things that you know that you're probably not doing, that you know you need to be doing in your personal daily disciplines. And what happens is it starts to spill over into other areas of your life. You're trusted with more responsibility at work. I mean, I had to work at Best Buy when I first got out of the military. And I met what was my next job. He was a Marine, selling him a computer. But I wouldn't have sold a computer had I not know anything about that computer. So when I first got out, I had to learn about things that I had no idea about in order to show value to the customers I was trying to sell. And in that process, that allowed me to land a job where I was able to get the sales experience, doing the daily call volume of over 100 calls a day, and the discipline of actually helping to convert the transactional business in order to show strategic value at the next level whenever it came to larger accounts. And so it was a process for me.
Yeah, no, that's good stuff, man. I mean, you can't say continue to blow Ambitious Vet brains right now without diving into the role versus identity. I really like that. And then also finding success and figuring out what that looks like in your industry, whatever you're passionate about. See, a lot of Ambitious Vets in this tribe, in our screening process, you guys are actually dealing anywhere from real estate investing all the way to how do I actually get better communication skills? How do I network better for opportunity? Well, it's actually figuring out first, what does success look like to you? And then actually figuring out who you need to connect with that has the success that you want. And then figuring out, what do they do on a daily basis? What are their habits? What are their routines, rituals, stuff like that? One thing I've learned about Stephen here is he is a habitual guy. He gets small wins every day that build confidence and self-respect, which I'm sure you'll probably dive in here in a bit. But you got to figure out what success looks like to you comparatively to the people that you look up to the most and study them. One of the first people I started studying when I first got out is Darren Hardy, publisher of Success Magazine, author of Compound Effect, Entrepreneur Roller Coaster. I used to study all of his content, and I really identified with his structure. See, I was a former Marine, so I identified with structure, everything down to time management, to how he planned his days, to how he read and absorbed knowledge in industries that he was passionate about, was all structured. And that's kind of what started creating traction for me. So I can definitely relate to you in that. So Ambitious Vets, figure out an industry that you're passionate about, figure out what success looks like to you, find the person that's having it in that industry and study them, right? And there'll come a day where, like Stephen just said, is that, your pace will eventually, win, right? You'll get some wins. You won't be beta. Like, your pace, it's all about your pace. See, pace will either kill you or create you, right? One of the one-liners I tell all my trainees that I train at my full-time career is that it's really time will either promote you or expose you. It's totally up to you, but it's all about your pace.
All right, Ambitious Vets. So we'll be right back into the trenches with Stephen Cullen. So he's about to dive into role versus identity, which is my favorite part of this whole episode. Before we go ahead and dive into that, guys, ever wonder how to maximize your time while still consuming content to inspire new ideas for new action and new results? Guys, we're already inside of this current episode, and the whole idea is, how do you get small wins? Well, you've got to get in and study some of the top thought leaders inside of your industry. That was one thing I did 5.5 years ago, and I haven't looked back in reading or listening to one book a month. Have you ever heard of this? Knowledge is power, but it's only power if you take action, implement what you consume, and start repurposing and creating it, right? So I want you guys to discover what millions already have, and that's Audible, right? You guys can get one audiobook a month from over 400,000 titles, pretty much. And you can exchange it anytime as far as any audibles or anything like that, you can switch it up anytime. If you're listening to one of those books that you're just like, I don't like this guy's tone, you can switch it up. No problem with that. Cancel anytime. It's a month-to-month agreement, guys. And you can keep your Audible books forever. And it's only $14.95. One time a month. And that gives you access to all the knowledge and the wisdom that you can feel your ears on, because we all know that we don't have time to sit there and read books all the time, but we always have that dry time commuting wise on a daily basis to listen. So guys, this is my challenge to you guys. I do get commissions from you guys clicking on that link inside of the show notes, guys. So if you guys are looking to give back to the show, this is one way to give back towards the value that we provide you. My challenge is get out there, download it for a month. If you don't like it, cancel it. No worries. I mean, but you guys, this is a place that you guys can gain access to audibles like Think and Grow Rich, Magic of Thinking Big, 11 Rings. I'm reading a book called Pivot right now because I'm pivoting out of my corporate sales trainer role. It's this unlimited access to knowledge and wisdom that's going to narrow your time frame. So guys, that link for downloading the Audible membership will be in the comments below. I encourage and challenge you guys to invest in yourself and where you want to be 5 years from now. So guys, back to the trenches with Stephen Cullen. Let's dive in.
So brother, I want you to dive into role versus identity, and how did you find the differentiator? Because that sounds like a huge aha moment for you out of the uniform. How did you find that?
Well, I mean, depending upon what industry you go into, there's somebody who's really good at it. And you touched on there's a tremendous amount of value in being able to humble yourself and realize you don't have things figured out. Right. And for somebody like me, who's trained as a Marine, the easiest way to make something happen is to tell us that we can't do something. Right. And it's something about an ego. And there's a huge difference between an unhealthy ego and a healthy ego, right? There was a podcast that we did, I think it was like episode 3, or I can't remember, but it talked about how that it was that ugly monster underneath the bridge. It's that troll that is hairy and nasty. That's your unchecked ego, right? And what happens is you end up thinking that you have it all figured out, when in fact you're dealing with the information that you have readily accessible, which in most cases isn't enough. And you're looking at it from the wrong perspective. So I know that, for instance, one of the things that I struggled with, and one of the things that I still struggle with today, is I feel like I'm about ready to be in a fight. I'm like using information that people have. For instance, a customer may tell me no, or they may talk to me in a way that I don't necessarily appreciate. Or a coworker may communicate with me in a way that I don't appreciate before I go into a sales call. And for some reason, I want to get combative. I want to get defensive. I want to start arguing. That's my comfort zone. I create a little bit of what I call like a pattern interrupt, and really kind of throw them off their game, and a little bit of manipulation. And it never really serves anybody other than maybe that dysfunction inside my head. And it's never really beneficial. So I say all that to say that I struggled with not being in control of things. I struggled with not being confident in letting other people go through their mental process and their mental clicks, and just asking questions and allowing the process to unfold however it may. And that's essentially what your role is in sales. Your role is to simply help people arrive to the conclusion that is most beneficial to them. And if it's beneficial enough for them, then it's going to be beneficial for you. Now, my identity was, I'm this Marine. I'm over the top. I'm a type A driver. I'm going to make it happen. And so confusing what my role was in that interaction with what my identity is, it messed up my results. There's a sales methodology called Sandler, and there's a bunch of them that are out there. It just happened to be the one that I went through, and they talk about the difference between your role and identity. And so I went through exercises slow down to speed up. I would literally stop and force myself to unpack why I was reacting a certain way. I started communicating with guys. One in particular, his name's Sean Shepard over at GrowthX, phenomenal individual, very concise in his diagnosis of where I fit in the corporate community. However, it was about 6 or 7 different folks that led me to that eventual conversation I had with him. And he made 4 suggestions for me. One of them included doing the Jordan Peterson self-authoring exercise, which was very beneficial. Again, that goes back to the differences between roles and identities. My identity and worth as an individual is different than my role. I'm going to get no's all the time at work. So it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm worth less. You know what I mean? So that's kind of a long-winded explanation as to where that fit.
No, I think it's pretty clear. And I think ambitious vets that are watching this right now, and they're even going to be watching this in the future, I think they'll definitely see the difference. I think anybody that's watching this now or watching this in the future, I want you or listening to this on the podcast on iTunes or Stitcher later on, is I want you guys to really, do some self-analyzation. I mean, that's one thing I loved about sales when I first got into it as well, is like, it's a very self-aware sport, industry, stuff like that, to where you have to do self-analyzation. And it sounds like to me that where Stephen started really starting to thrive in life is how he realized how to differentiate this intense, very direct Marine that's just going to get the job done, get the mission done, to being someone that, okay, who is Stephen outside the uniform? Who is Stephen as a sales profession? How can I provide value? How can I do this? And still in an intense way, but how do I disengage the role? Because I feel like we do identify with the role of a Marine, even when we're out, man. I fall into it all the time, especially with my girlfriend. I'm that rough, that tough, that devil dog, man.
Yeah. Well, hey, people are into all types of things. What you do behind closed doors is what you do, Chris. I'm just messing with you.
Yeah.
But let me be honest with you there for a second. You touched on something that's important.
Yeah.
First of all, let me ask you a question. Do you feel like there's do you feel like less of a human being? Do you feel worth less if you're not able to either hit a target or you didn't accomplish a sale that you thought was going well?
That's a really good question, man. I mean, I think I confuse my performance with my identity a lot. I make it mean that I am ineffective, and it takes time, like you said, where I have to step back, unpackage. Like I got to get my thoughts out and on like a journal. This is Honor, Courage, Commitment, the nonprofit's journal from last year's Military Influencer Conference. I'm using that as a journal right now, but I'll have to get my thoughts out on a journal to kind of unpackage. Okay, why am I so emotional about this failure? Right. So it's a good point, man.
Was Napoleon Hill talked about, I don't remember what book. I think it was Think and Grow Rich. It may have been Master Key to Riches work. And again, self-help material for some folks, not for some folks, doesn't change the content and doesn't change the success principles that are there. But he talks about one of the biggest reasons for failure, and failure not in the sense of, hey, I messed up, I screwed up, geez Louise, let me go learn from that. Failure in the sense of it'll change the course of your life and literally start it going down the toilet. And that is choosing the wrong partner. And they can be interpreted in a bunch of different ways. Choosing the wrong partner could be choosing the wrong spouse, choosing the wrong business partner. And I think in the context that he wrote about, he was talking about your spouse. I'm married, happily married. We'll be celebrating, 12 years? It'll be 12 years this November, right? I'm excited about that.
Wow, congrats on that, brother.
Thank you, man. We worked our tails off for it. We've got 2 beautiful boys as a result of that work. But in the beginning, I always felt like I needed to, charge and, be the leader from the front and beat my chest and kick doors in. And I'm going to lead my wife through the, and really quite frankly, what was happening is I was just leading her and my family down a debt-ridden, overspending, under-earning spiral of shit. So anyway, that's what ego will get you. Ego will get you into a situation where you think that you're working your tail off. You're getting after it. You're busy, but you're not doing anything that's really productive towards communicating in your relationship. You're not doing anything that's productive towards maybe the long-term strategy of success in your life. But hey, man, you're working 80, 90 hours a week, and you're making it happen there.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, yeah, that's great stuff, man. I mean, one thing I heard, like what you were saying, man, is like when you fail, when you make mistakes, you fall back on your habits, rituals, and routines. I think that's kind of what I do, man, is whenever I am getting ahead of myself or my pace is slowing down on my mistakes or catching up to my pace, using your words, which are brilliant. Like I'll fall back on my habits and routines to gain perspective. I'll slow down a little bit, gain a perspective. Like I was telling you before we went live here, is I'm having a week where I'm not pushing a lot of content out right now online because I'm having a perspective moment. I had a huge breakthrough. So thank you for reminding me of what life actually does. And, you know, with the self-help world, there's good things and bad things about it. But at the end, if you're trying to be a top performer out of the uniform, why wouldn't you invest into best practices? Napoleon Hill's 10 Steps to Predict Success out of the uniform. Whenever Steven writes his book, buying his book, you better write a book, man. You got tons of wisdom. I'm like taking notes right now.
Coming out in October, by the way. It's coming out in October. Pre-sale will happen October 1st, but it's coming out at the end. Title is yet to be determined, but it's probably going to be something like Knucklehead. Probably.
Yeah. I love it, man. I love it. So now speaking of Knucklehead, man, let's dive into this. I mean, obviously you spent a lifetime creating this brand of like creating self-respect. It sounds like it's been a brand identity that you created back when you got into the Marine Corps, man, creating self-respect. Don't be beta, get some wins. So tell us about this brand that you've created and kind of what led up to creating this brand, man.
Well, Chris, your story is one that's really cool. And I appreciate the platform to plug Knucklehead, but let's bring this back to your story for a second, right? Mm-hmm. You're from the great state of Missouri, right near St. Louis. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. So you're out in Cali now, right? So you're flying solo. There's no family or anything like that relatively close to you. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And whenever you got out of the military, you slept on a wrestling mat, if I remember correctly. Is that right?
The school desk to my name, man. Yep.
So. If there was a support structure that's meant to reinforce or support you, not just you, but let's just take you in this instance because it's a story. It's meant to be your family. Your family's they're your sounding board. They're your your rudder, right? They keep you.
Udder too.
I guess so. Yeah, I guess in the Midwest, but they're your they keep you on course. Mm-hmm. And you're in California. They're in Missouri. It's difficult for them to help you be steered in the right direction. Mm-hmm. Yet there was lessons and principles and things that you can look back on whenever you were growing and developing. Yeah, that you can take from them, whether you want to emulate them or not, and you can apply it to your everyday life. And when my dad left, I mean, first of all, I left my mom and my stepdad at 12, 13 years old to go live with my dad. And he left. He said, "See ya." And it wasn't like he gave me the option. It wasn't, he gave me the option to come with him, or he gave me the option to stay where I was. And there I was at 15 years old, being asked if I wanted to move to the other side of the country and go to Washington, D.C., or stay with my buddies and the girlfriend that I had at the time, and stay there. I mean, what is a 15-year-old going to do? He's going to go, well, I want to be with my friends, Dad. Like I'm earning my place on the football team. I want to go play college football. I have to go re-earn everything back in DC if I go out there, and who knows how that's going to work. Yep. So anyway, I say all that to say, and I tie it into your story, is because you got to kind of figure it out. And if your family is not there, then it's nobody else's responsibility to make sure that you mature, develop, and grow. But there were some people who really decided to take me in. They were buddies of mine that became brothers. that I still keep in connect, that I still keep in contact with today. I paid his parents' rent at 15, 16 years old. I worked construction jobs. First thing in the morning, we wake up at 4:00 in the morning, go pour concrete, go to school, and then have a work release program. I'm sorry. It was a work, like you work and you go to school a little bit later. So a couple of the credits that you got like in the morning were like a work program.
Yeah.
So 4:00 in the morning, and then we go to school at like 11, and then we go to football practice afterwards. So thinking about like that example and that story is what kind of laid the foundation for me screwing up. What laid the foundation for me kind of having an issue with authority and having a problem listening to folks who have things figured out.
Yep.
And so really what happened was it was this ongoing issue with authority and a lack of maturity that led to this development of what knucklehead actually means. And fortunately, I was able to find an incredible woman who's my best friend on the planet, my incredible wife, who put up with my crap for as long as she did. And she's never been scared to communicate with me authentically exactly what it is that I need to hear, whether I like hearing it or not. And almost in a way helped me down that path of communicating some of these wins. And I didn't realize that through that process of communicating with her not wanting to listen to it anymore, and just wanting to see the results, me putting in the work has led to this ongoing development of, hey, listen, I'm not afraid to screw up. As a matter of fact, I know I'm going to. So just get out of my way. Let me screw up, and I'm going to go make it happen. Yep. So if you're okay with that, then let's go succeed together. And if that's a problem for you, then we're not on the same team. You go make it happen for you, and I'm going to go make it happen for somebody else who wants me on their team, or myself. I'll do both. You tell me. So that's kind of how I tie that back into your story, just because I think that's what you did. You didn't have to go do what you did, but you may have had some poor decisions that put you in that situation. I don't know intimately. I'm not intimately as familiar with it, but what I do understand is, as a result of your decision to make it happen, all that stuff was probably the fuel. It added spice and flavor to your story.
Yeah. So. No, I mean, that's why I love you so much, man. That's why I'm close to you. I make myself extremely accessible, and I appreciate you making yourself as accessible as you give me your time when we're on the back end just bullshitting about stuff, because I do, man. I resonate with you a lot. Never had much. And I always was coming from an underdog place. I always felt like I needed to prove something to whoever, because I never had many resources. And I was a kid that graduated high school at 150 pounds because I didn't have anything to eat. So I think that's where ambition comes from for me. And it sounds like for you, finding your wife was a way for you to create a strong foundation to grow off of. And I think a woman in a man's life, and when you have a strong woman that can nurture your heart throughout your failures, because I just found a really good woman too, man. And she's, in personal development, she's a hell of a lot more successful than I am. So I'm like, yes, winning. Don't be beta. You know what I mean? And I'm just like, okay, nice. Like, her strengthens me to just create those small wins, like you said. So I think that was something good for you, man. And I actually admire you for, don't be a wuss, earn your self-respect based on your past experiences, because you're your brand. And there's so many people out there in the world today that aren't their brand. They don't grind. They're not in their trenches. Like right now, if I turn this laptop around, my whole living room is this production studio. I have no living room furniture because I'm standing for impact, not superficiality, not revenue, all this kind of stuff. And all that comes, man. We are a brand. And that's what's cool. And that's what I love about Knucklehead Podcast, man. That's what I love about you. That's what I love about your brand, is you're living your brand. And I'm a big believer in your life experiences creates your life work. And Knucklehead Podcast is like your life's work, man. I love your passion when you're in your element. It's so natural. So, I mean, tell us about this podcast, man. Like, tell us some of the people you've interviewed. What's one of the biggest things you learned? Whatever you want to share about this podcast, man. I love where it came to be. but talk about the vision for this thing.
I appreciate that. So my first episode was, geez Louise, maybe last October, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So those of you who are listening and you don't have an HR department just yet, you will at some point in time either build a business and start an HR department, or be part of a business that had an HR department or has an HR department. So I'm gonna throw this out there. It was not cool. So first of all, I was asked to build a sales team, and I did. We started to grow relatively quickly in the commodity trading world, which is really just beef, pork, seafood, and poultry. And so we bought and sold commodities. We essentially were able to maximize the margin between those two, and that's how we substantiated our existence. You're kind of are what you can communicate in that industry. So you are your word, your telephone actor. So your word means a lot. It was terrible for me to have to deal with folks who weren't authentic, or they were one way in the office, but then a different way in a meeting.
Right.
It was just, I got really irritated with it. The semantics of corporate culture and politics really didn't sit well with me. And I was dealing with some mental stuff at the time. I didn't understand that I didn't understand that I had undiagnosed anxiety and PTSD, all these things that are, I'm told, are hinderers, as opposed to opportunities for me to overcome them and be a better me. I didn't understand that. Okay. So what happened was I got reactive, and I told my HR director, essentially I was describing that she was the equivalent of a female canine to my wife. I was sitting at the text message. I was like, I can't believe this woman's lying to my superior at the time. And I was calling her names. I was venting to my wife. And about an hour later, my wife calls me, and she's like, hey, what's going on? How's everything going? I'm like, what do you mean, how's everything going? Didn't you get my text messages? Well, come to find out, instead of texting my wife, I was actually texting the HR director.
Oh, shit.
So I did not spend much time there after that.
I'm sure.
And I was in a senior leadership position. I was on the executive team.
Wow.
And there's, long story short, is in today's culture and in today's environment, that is not tolerated behavior. They don't have a whole lot of, there's not a lot of leash there. So anyway, I say all that to say that I needed to communicate, instead of trying to act like you have it all figured out. You've got to be willing to go out there and screw up and make mistakes. Yeah. Otherwise, you're never going to be able to accomplish anything significant. So that's how we started Knucklehead Podcast. And again, It goes back to all those situations and stories and circumstances I had talked about and alluded to before. And what come to find out, in the multi-level marketing community, there's this kind of idea that you can share your successes and your failures, and people are going to, overcome things and have bad things happen to them and succeed anyway. And I think that that's great. However, it's not unique to that industry. It's not a microcosm of society as a whole. It's there's success everywhere. I mean, literally, if you're really, really good and you want to be the best in whatever it is that you're doing, go find somebody. Today is the most, it's the most accessible it's ever been. You go access that individual and be the best at it, and go compete with that person or collaborate with that person, for crying out loud. But the fact is you don't have to be in sales in order to go try to be the best at what it is that you're doing. So this idea of, if you put yourself out there and you screw up, you've got to be able to ask folks, you've got to be able to be willing to put yourself out there. And I did. I asked a hero of mine personally, Tim Kennedy, to be on the podcast. This man's fought in the cage for a living. He's a Green Beret. He's an American hero. He's a patriot. He is unapologetically American, Ranger Up, founder. He's a man's man. And, I'm talking about the beginning of the podcast. I think I was maybe at 7 episodes. He ended up being on episode 15, but I was 7 episodes in, and I had the audacity to ask this multimillionaire, successful individual to come and talk about what it meant to don't be beta. To talk about what being an alpha meant to him. And to him, it meant, wearing some tights and going and taking dancing lessons with his wife so he could take her to Argentina and go dance with his wife.
Wow.
I thought that was incredible. I'm like, here is this, larger than life man's man. Just he's a leader. He's a good dude. He wears his emotions on his sleeve, and he's not trying to impress anybody. He's just being himself. I was fortunate enough to go to an Echelon Front event. Thank you, Bottle Breacher and Echelon Front, for opening my St. Pauli's Girl a little bit earlier tonight. But at Echelon Front, my buddies over there. So JP Donnell, he's an absolute stud. Mike Sorelli, absolute stud. Dave Burke, stud. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Flynn Cochran, Jocko Willenick, Leif Babin, you name it. Those guys are freaking studs. However, I was a logistician Marine. I wasn't a Navy SEAL. I didn't go kick in doors in Ramadi. I sat behind a desk in a COC and went on some security patrols in Alhambra province. I'm not under any delusions of grandeur here. So I ride on the coattails of the reputation that the infantry and all of those special forces guys did. And the fact is I didn't do what they did, but you know what? I can still be as disciplined and perform the way that they do and just be me. And they're like, oh, okay, he's not trying to beat us. He can be me. And so JP Donnell and I had an opportunity to talk about what that meant and how to help people. You don't have to be a Navy SEAL to be a high performer. You don't have to be a Marine to be a high performer. You could be a civilian out there who just helps somebody change their tire. Long story short is be the best you that you can be. JP Donnell and I talked about that. He's a stud. He's been on the podcast. We've got a boatload of other folks. We have this guy who started this organization called Veteran Empowerment Transition, Chris Hoffman. I don't know if you've heard of him. He has been on the podcast. Let me tell you, I'm stoked about having people who stretch me, who sit there. It's like an hour of mentorship. I can sit there and ask somebody the questions and they can tell me. And I'm like, are you kidding? This is great. I'm an idiot. Tell me more how I'm an idiot. So
I think that's why you're such a good interviewer, brother, is that you are curiously engaged. You don't come from a place of like knowing it all or have it all figured out. And I think that's what makes the best podcasters. It's just like being an idiot, like you said, and just asking the questions that give you aha moments. Like you've given me probably 3 aha moments throughout this whole process. And I've asked you like layering questions to learn more about it, because it's absolutely amazing what you can learn when you just ask the right questions.
And lower your ego. You've had a lot of things that have happened to you this week that have, allowed you to be in a posture where you can receive, and it's not always going to be that way.
True.
I mean, you're going to be talking to folks sometimes and it's just going to bounce off, and you'll go back and listen to it later and you're gonna be like, oh crap, I didn't realize that was there. That's what's cool about reading books over and over and over again. And I don't do it enough, but I tell you, I've read a bunch of them. I read a bunch of books, and all that is just a bunch of gobbledygook that somebody slapped down on a sheet of paper.
Yep.
And there's a reason why my son is 7 years old, can read at the pace that he can read at. There's a reason why my 4-year-old will be able to read, because he needs to be able to formulate his own thoughts instead of regurgitate the crap that I tell him. He needs to be able to read and formulate and learn how to think.
Yeah.
So,
I love it, brother. I love it. I love what you're learning in the Knucklehead podcast. I'm excited how you repurpose that content. That's one thing that I've focused on inside the Ambitious Vet is how do I interview these top performers? In my case, I'm interviewing top performing veterans and figuring out 101 stuff on what made them create long-term success out of the uniform so I can repurpose it. And you're just figuring out, you don't have to have it all figured out. You can fail forward. And in fact, most of the best in the world, the most alpha people in the world don't have it all figured out. A lot of people see this alpha, like this Sylvester Stallone, this Arnold Schwarzenegger, they in person are like, ugh! Like you see on movies and stuff like that. But it's like really like most successful people in the world carry themselves as a lifelong learner. And we give up like this sense of knowing, right? And I'm excited to see where you take the Knucklehead podcast, man, because it's brilliant. You're making some of the most alpha people like turn into kids on your podcast, man. That's not easy to do, and that's masterful. And I think for anybody that knows Tim Kennedy or has been following Echelon Front and Jocko Willink's movement, those guys are one of the most alphas in the world, man. And they're the most badass guys out there on the planet right now in the business world. and as far as veterans and ambitious vets. And I definitely encourage you guys to go in and check out Steven's podcast, Knucklehead Podcast. Well, I'll comment on the comments below. I'll post my episode. And then did you happen to interview Tim Kennedy?
Yeah, he was on episode 15.
I'm going to post
I think you were episode 20. Okay. 20. Vet CEO Chris Hoffman. And what's cool about you is you came out with a story that you hadn't told anybody. I think in that podcast. I don't know if you remember it, or we can repurpose it. You know what? Go listen to it. iTunes. Yeah. Go listen to it on Google Play, Podbean, your favorite podcast listening app. Chris likes Stitcher. That's cool. You can go do that on Stitcher.
Yeah, I'm an Android user.
So, or go to YouTube if you want to. I say you want to fall asleep, go to YouTube and watch our videos, because they're not great. They're not high production value, but that was also on purpose. Again, I didn't want to have a huge production. I didn't want to have. I'm in the downstairs office in my home that we're moving out of. Right. But I wanted to have just raw content, not Gary V style, because Gary V is Gary V. I wanted to be able to say, you don't have to have a buttoned up. You don't need to have a blue. Like I've got a hairy looking microphone that is terrible. That's not even plugged into anything. Right. But my point in saying
else in a microphone.
Right on. But my point in saying that is I didn't need to I purposely started because I wanted people to see once we got to episode 50 or once we got to episode 100 that you can ramp the production value and make it more effective. You can reach a different type of audience, and there's a maturity to the product and process too that we'll get to. But the fact is we don't need to. My message is don't be beta. So that means start with what you got and go make it happen. So we did. Right. So that was the point. That was the whole point of it. And we'll continue to do it. So,
and your message is fucking awesome, man. I mean, and don't have it all figured out, fail forward, get out there and just take action, get some small wins, add up to big wins. And that's the same thing we're doing here, man, is we're just figuring out how do we build a movement? You got to test the market first. You can't have this huge production studio if you don't got one listener, right? You've got to first figure out if your content resonates and get better at your content delivery. And that's exactly where both of me and you are in. I'm excited to grow right beside you, brother, because that's what Marines do, man. We grow right beside, united, we rise together, we succeed, brother.
When I grow up, I want to be like Chris Hoffman. I'll just put it that way.
Come on, man. I can't wait till your book is published, man. You better let me know ahead of time so I can promote the shit out of that.
I'm sure you'll pick it apart with some red marker or something like that. Or
man.
Marines, we'll kind of drag through it with crayon. So that's
exactly. I had 20 people edit mine before I let it go because mine was retarded. But guys, definitely go.
It's a good book. It's a good book. Those everybody who's listening probably has already read it, but I really like the PDF version of it because I can go back and I can be on my phone. I'm kind of addicted to my phone. I understand it's a problem. However, I really enjoy being able to read your book. I like how simple it is. I like how concise it is. I like how it's not highfalutin. It's direct and to the point. It's practical. If you can't follow those 10 steps, then quite frankly, follow 2 and you'll get to 3. Eventually you'll get, just start taking some steps. Chris laid them out for you pretty plainly in his book. He did a good job.
Yeah, you're a good promoter and cross promoter, man. But this conversation is all about you. But you guys can definitely go pick up the ebook on Amazon. But brother, I just want to thank you for your time, man. We spent a hell of a lot of time together. I think there's a lot of golden grenades inside of here. I'm excited to repurpose this, get this out everywhere. To ambitious vets out there. And I think you really opened your heart wide open. And brother, I just want to acknowledge you for who you are, man, for the alphas out there. I think for the industry, as far as being an alpha and how hard it's been to lower my ego, right? And let people come in, love me and be vulnerable. And because that was one of the hardest things I dealt with is building, trusting people and stuff like that. But it was just who you are, man, is helping alphas not take themselves seriously and creating that product in the marketplace, man. That is brilliant. And I admire you for what you're doing, man. I'm just I'm excited to see where this whole Knucklehead Promotion LLC company goes for you, man. And thank you for, definitely giving us your time tonight at the Ambitious Vet Live Show.
Anytime, buddy. Anytime. Except for when my old lady needs me to take care of business, if you know what I'm saying. I do have 2 kids for a reason. So
there you go, man.
Anytime other than that.
Yeah, man. Rough that tough, that devil dog, brother. Get some.
Get some wins. Get some wins.
Yes.
Well, we have these nifty stickers. I actually just got my second shipment of stickers in. So if you order your Don't Be Beta or Get Some Win shirt from knuckleheadpodcast.com, it'll do two things. One, it'll force me to fix the fulfillment problem I have. And then second, it'll actually, it'll help me get these in the hands of you. So you'll be able to get stickers, a shirt, and a little index card that says we love you from Knucklehead Podcast.
Fucking love it. And where can people go to find more about Knucklehead Podcast, brother?
They can go to our Facebook page, Knucklehead Promotions. They could check us out on LinkedIn, Knucklehead Promotions LLC. They can they could find us at Knucklehead Podcast on Instagram. They go to YouTube, Knucklehead Podcast, and they can obviously tune in on iTunes or Podbean, their favorite podcast listening app. They can check us out there, or they could go to knuckleheadpodcast.com and order some shirts. Go check it out.
There you have it, Ambitious Vets. Episode number 35 of the Ambitious Vet Show with Stephen Cullen. Guys, I just hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. It's just something happens. Something breeds up when you get two crayon-eating Marines together and just start talking about how do you make it happen out of the uniform. It was just a remarkable conversation. One of the biggest things that stood out for me as a golden grenade was really slowing down to speed up. A lot of us just want to get out and hard charge it as military people, right? But sometimes when you just sit back, right, kind of ask some questions, some deep questions, kind of like what we were talking about inside of this podcast. It's just far where are these conversations coming from? Where are these emotions coming from? And starting reflecting, journaling, and stuff like that, so you can actually have clear, space to pivot to a new path to be more effective, guys. I really want you guys to let that sink in, especially his role versus identity. Golden grenade, that I want you guys to get out there and take on your life in the next week around, are you collapsing your role versus your identity, right? A lot of us ambitious vets were going to identify with what we were in the uniform, right? How we operated. But guys, it's differentiating the role where you're taking actions in that moment versus your identity. Your identity will allow you to be effective in that role, but there's just functions and daily tasks in that role that you can only operate a certain way in that role. So guys, I loved this episode. If you guys loved it as much as I did, go and rate and review the podcast for one, but go and share this episode. Get it out there. One of the biggest things that's going to cause increase in your life tomorrow is sharing value to people. That was probably the biggest breakthrough I got when I got out of the uniform, was not trying to get so much for myself, but giving what I wanted for myself to other people as far as value, wisdom, stuff like this, content that would just allow my brothers and sisters out of the uniform, help them narrow the learning curve of what it takes to actually make an impact out of the uniform. So guys, do what you may. At the end of the day, it's your life. But guys, as always, we already know that you're warrior made, but to become passion driven, go utilize one golden grenade you just got from this episode with Stephen Cullen. I promise you guys, in the next 3 months, 6 months, or maybe even a year, who cares how long it takes, just be consistent and get those small wins, as Stephen was saying. And I promise you, people are going to be gathering to come and hear you speak. People are going to be coming and gathering to hear your expertise. Guys, I'm not lying. It happened to me in just 3 years. Guys, now let's get out there and let's go